So we're at the beginning of this journey. We have a video series. We're going to cover a lot of topics. I think the very first question we should ask, Ward, is before we begin this journey, how do we get started? Is there anything that we should be careful about before we begin?
Absolutely. Our starting point is acceptance. Acceptance is a critical, pivotal point. There's a period before acceptance, and there's a period after acceptance. So the context of this entire set of programs is after acceptance. And let me explain. There was a woman who did amazing work. Her name was Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she wrote a book called On Death and Dying, and a number of other books. Her focus was on the process of dealing with loss. Not only death, because what I'm describing applies to other kinds of loss as well. But she discovered a remarkable thing, which is that when we lose something or someone, or are faced with a catastrophic diagnosis, such as a terminal illness, we go through predictable and identical steps. So the first thing that happens is we simply deny it. Are you sure? I want another opinion. Immediately our brain just says, no, that can't be. Then, when that information comes back to us and it starts to sink in that, oh, this is for real and there's real data, we get very angry. Very angry. We lash out and we want to punish the messenger. Maybe the caregiver, maybe the practitioner, maybe family, but we get very, very angry. Next, we begin to soften the anger with some bargaining. It's as if, well, I want a little more time. You see, some reality is starting to sink in. It's like, okay, this is for real. It really makes me angry, but it looks like it's going to happen. I wonder if I could get some more time out of it. And so there's this bargaining process. And eventually, there's kind of a realization that that's not working, the anger didn't work, the denial didn't work, and the crushing reality starts to settle in, leading to depression. Great sadness, a great weariness of spirit, and a very painful place to be. But it's amazing because at a certain point, it's as if we dive deeply and then start to rise up in acceptance. And acceptance isn't throwing in the towel. It's not, oh, I give up, it doesn't matter. It becomes a recognition that somehow, as tragic and as painful and as sad as all this is, somehow it makes sense in a larger context. All things shall pass. It's a perfect example of acceptance, kind of from a philosophical point of view. So, we have these very well-defined steps. What's not defined are the behaviors that those steps exhibit. So how your anger will manifest, how your depression will manifest, that changes from person to person. The other thing that is not predictable is the time frame. Some people can go through this process very rapidly. A matter of minutes in the case of somebody struck suddenly. And many people that describe near-death experiences talk about going through the Kubler-Ross stages in a matter of moments. If that's not the case, Sometimes it's a matter of days and weeks that this process takes. But here's the point. It takes as long as it takes. And it cannot be rushed. And this is vital for the caregiver to understand, so that when you're in your depression phase, you don't need to be cheered up. You need to be depressed. You need to go through it. You cannot avoid it. And if you're in your anger stage, it's not about negotiating. It's not about what you're angry about. It's not about the salt shaker or the garbage that needs to be taken out. It's not about whatever you're arguing about. It's about that stage and that process that's going on internally. There's another wrinkle to this, because for a caregiver, for a spouse, for example, the spouse can have the same response. In other words, let's say person A gets this diagnosis and they begin this process of dealing with these stages. And in that process, the spouse now has to come to reality that they too are traumatized, and they go into denial. How can this person I love be this ill? Now, if both of these people in this intimate relationship are both going through these stages, imagine what it's like when both of them are in anger. Whew. This is tough. No wonder relationships are strained. If both are in denial, or both are in anger, or both are trying to bargain with each other, both in depression. Think what that does to the other people in the household, the children, for example. I mean, this is a very difficult passage, a very difficult passage. Thankfully, it usually doesn't last too long. And when one comes to acceptance, that's that realization that, oh, all of my blocks have been knocked down. The house of cards has been destroyed. Now what do I do? How do I live with this diagnosis? And that's the focus of this program. Once you've come to acceptance, how do you choose to be in the world? How do you choose to reorganize what's left of your life? Days, weeks, months, years. But it's critical that nobody engage in these activities or these programs. I wouldn't even watch any of more videos until you begin to come to that place of acceptance. Otherwise, it's all going to just sound like Jabberwocky.